Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valkyrie, watching the stars drift past the main viewing screen. The ship hummed quietly as it moved through deep space, far from Earth and any human colony. This was routine patrol duty, the kind of mission that usually meant nothing exciting would happen for weeks. Jake had been in command of the Valkyrie for 3 years now. The ship was one of Earth's newest and most powerful vessels, built for long-range exploration and defense of human space. His crew of 42 men and women were the best Earth had to offer, trained for any situation they might face in the dark reaches of space. "Captain, we're approaching the outer marker for Sector 7, said Lieutenant Lisa Rodriguez from her position at the tactical station. Lisa was his second in command, a sharp officer who had proven herself in the Mars Colonial Wars alongside Jake. "Very good, Lieutenant. Take us to standard patrol speed," Jake replied, settling back in his captain's chair. Sector 7 was at the very edge of human-controlled space, where the real frontier began. Beyond this point lay unexplored systems, and whatever dangers might be waiting in the darkness. Tony Kumar, the ship's weapons specialist, looked up from his console. "All defensive systems are green, Captain. We're ready for anything out here," Jake nodded. Tony was young but skilled, the kind of officer who knew every weapon system on the ship better than the people who built them. Next to him sat Maya Johnson, their communications expert. Maya could pull signals out of space that most people would never even notice. "Maya, anything interesting on the comm channels?" Jake asked. "Just the usual background chatter from the colonies, sir. Nothing worth reporting," Maya answered, then paused. Her fingers moved quickly over her console. "Wait, I'm picking up something strange." Jake sat forward. After 10 years in space, he had learned to pay attention when his communications officer said something was strange. "What kind of strange?" Maya's face showed confusion as she worked at her station. "It's a signal, but it's not coming through normal channels. The computer says it's impossible, but I'm definitely receiving something." "Put it on speaker," Jake ordered. Static filled the bridge, then slowly cleared to reveal a voice speaking in a language none of them recognized. The tone was desperate, pleading. Even without understanding the words, everyone on the bridge could hear the fear and hope mixed together. "Can you translate it?" Jake asked. Maya shook her head. "The computer doesn't recognize the language, but there's something else. The signal is encoded with mathematical patterns that suggest intelligence. Someone is trying very hard to make sure we understand this message." Lisa looked at her own screens. "Captain, this signal is coming from outside our sector." "Way outside." "The computer calculates the source is at least 3 sectors away, in completely unexplored space." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How is that possible? "We don't have any ships that far out, and we've never made contact with alien species." "I don't know, sir," Lisa replied. "But the signal is definitely coming from there." Maya suddenly straightened in her chair. "Captain, I think I'm getting a translation. The computer is starting to recognize patterns in the message." "Let's hear it," Jake said. Maya's fingers flew over her controls, and slowly the alien voice began to change. The ship's translation system worked to convert the strange words into English. The voice that emerged was mechanical but carried the same desperate tone as the original. "People of the 3rd planet, we call to you across the void. Our worlds are dying. Our children cry out in darkness. The devourers come, and we cannot stop them. You are our only hope. Please, warriors of Earth, help us." Silence fell over the bridge. Everyone stared at the speakers, trying to process what they had just heard. Jake was the first to speak. "3rd planet? How do they know about Earth?" "There's more, Captain," Maya said, her voice quiet. "The message is repeating, but there are additional parts." The translated voice continued. "We have watched your signals, learned your languages, studied your wars. Among all the peoples of the galaxy, Only you fight as we need fighters to fight. You battle not just for territory or resources, but for ideas, for freedom, for those who cannot defend themselves. The Devourers consume everything. In their path, 12 of our worlds have fallen. Our fleets are broken. But your people, your warriors, they might succeed where we have failed. Tony looked up from his weapons console. Captain, how could they know about our military history? We've never sent signals that far into space. I don't know, Jake replied, his mind racing. Maya, is there more to the message? Yes, sir. It includes coordinates and technical data about their location. They're providing everything we would need to find them. Lisa pulled up a star chart on the main screen. Captain, those coordinates place them in the Kepler 442 system. That's 3 sectors beyond our furthest exploration. The trip would take US 2 weeks at maximum speed. Jake stood and walked to the viewing screen, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien civilization was crying for help, and somehow they knew enough about humanity to ask for exactly the kind of help humans might be able to provide. Sir, Lisa said quietly, our orders are to patrol this sector and report back to Earth Command. We're not authorized to make contact with alien species or to leave our assigned area. Jake knew she was right. Military protocol was clear on this matter. Any contact with alien life was supposed to be reported immediately to Earth, and no ship was to act alone in such situations. But the desperation in that translated voice, the specific request for Earth's warriors, suggested something far more urgent than normal first contact procedures could handle. Maya, can you determine how long ago this message was sent? Jake asked. Maya worked at her console for several minutes. Based on the signal degradation and the distance, I estimate this message is about 6 hours old, sir. 6 hours. If the situation was as desperate as the message suggested, 6 hours could mean the difference between saving a civilization and arriving too late to do anything but count the dead. Jake returned to his captain's chair and looked around at his crew. These men and women had followed him through dangerous missions before. They trusted his judgment, and he trusted theirs. But this decision would affect more than just their ship and crew. Tony, what's our current weapons and supply status? Jake asked. Full combat load, sir. We're ready for extended operations. Lisa, plot a course to those coordinates. Maya, prepare a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've received a distress call from an unknown species and are responding under emergency protocols. Lisa turned to look at him. Captain, are you sure about this? Jake looked back at the star chart where the coordinates marked a destination. That might change everything humanity thought it knew about the universe. Somewhere out there, people were dying, and they had specifically asked for Earth's help. Set course for the Kepler 442 system, maximum speed. If someone is calling for Earth's warriors, then that's exactly what they're going to get. 2 weeks later, the Hughes Valkyrie dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. What Captain Jake Morrison and his crew saw on their screens made them all fall silent. The system was filled with debris. Huge pieces of metal and destroyed ships floated in space like a graveyard. Some of the wreckage was clearly alien in design, with smooth curves and materials that gleamed even in the dim starlight. Other pieces looked different, more threatening, with sharp edges and a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. My God, whispered Lisa Rodriguez from her tactical station. What happened here? Jake stood at the center of the bridge, studying the main viewing screen. Maya, are you picking up any signals? Any survivors? Maya worked quickly at her communications console. I'm detecting several weak signals, Captain. Most are automated. Distress beacons, but there are a few that might be from living beings. Put me through to the strongest signal, Jake ordered. After a moment, a new voice filled the bridge. This one was different from the desperate message they had received 2 weeks ago. It was tired, filled with pain, but still carried authority. Unknown. Vessel, this is Admiral Vex Thornwall of the Calarian Defense Fleet. Identify yourself immediately, or we will open fire. Jake stepped forward. Admiral Thornwall, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Hughes Valkyrie. We received your distress call and came to help. There was a long pause. Then the alien voice returned, but now it sounded amazed. Earth vessel, you actually came, we thought. We hoped, but we never believed you would really come. We're here. Now, Admiral, what's your situation? Desperate, Captain Morrison. The Devourers hit us 3 days ago. We lost most of our fleet. I have maybe 20 ships left out of 200. We're hiding in the asteroid field near the 4th planet, but they'll find us soon. Jake looked at Lisa, who was studying her. Tactical displays. She shook her head, meaning she couldn't detect any immediate threats. Admiral, we'd like to meet with you face to face. Can you accommodate a small shuttle? Yes, Captain. We'll send you coordinates, but be careful. The Devourers have scout ships throughout the system. An hour later, Jake sat across from Admiral Vex Thornwall in the small meeting room aboard the Calarian flagship. The alien looked surprisingly human in some ways, but his skin had a slight blue tint and his eyes were larger than a human's. What struck Jake most was how tired the Admiral looked, like someone who had been fighting a losing battle for too long. Captain Morrison, Thornwall began, I must ask how you knew to come. Our message was sent in desperation. We never expected anyone to actually respond. Jake leaned forward. Admiral, that's something we need to discuss. Your message mentioned things about Earth that you shouldn't know. You talked about our wars, our military history. How is that possible? Thornwall was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to a large screen on the wall. With a gesture, he activated it, showing images that made Jake's heart race. There were pictures of Earth from space, videos of human cities, and most shocking of all, footage from human wars throughout history. We've been watching you for over 50 years, Captain, Thornwall said quietly. Your radio and television signals reach far into space. We learned your languages, studied your culture, and most importantly, we studied how you fight. Jake stared at the images. There was footage from World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and more recent conflicts. You've been spying on us. Not spying, Captain. Learning. You see, the Calarian people are peaceful by nature. We've never been good at war. When we met other species in the galaxy, we found that most were like us. They fought for territory, for resources, for survival. But at humans are different. The screen changed to show more recent footage, including news reports about humanitarian missions and peacekeeping operations. Your people fight for ideas, Captain Morrison. You fight for freedom, for justice, for people you've never met and will never see again. When we realized the Devourers were coming, we knew we needed warriors who could think differently, who could fight not just to win, but to save others. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Tell me about these Devourers. Thornwall's expression grew dark. They appeared in our space 6 months ago. At first, we thought they were just another hostile species. We've dealt with pirates and raiders before. But the Devourers are something else entirely. The screen now showed recordings from the recent battles. Jake watched in horror as he saw what the Devourers could do. Their ships were massive, dark things that seemed to absorb energy weapons. When they fired back, their weapons didn't just destroy ships, they seemed to corrupt them, turning the metal and technology into something twisted and wrong. They don't just conquer, Captain, they consume. Everything they touch becomes part of them. Ships, technology, even people. We've seen our own vessels turned against us, crewed by our own people, but changed, made into extensions of the Devourer. Collective. Lisa Rodriguez, who had accompanied Jake to the meeting, spoke up. How many ships do they have? We estimate several thousand in this region alone, Thornwall replied. But they're not just ships, Lieutenant. They're parts of a single entity. They think together, move together, fight together. Traditional military tactics are useless against them. Jake studied the tactical displays. What about their weaknesses? Every enemy has weaknesses. If they have any, we haven't found them. Our energy weapons are absorbed by their hulls. Our kinetic weapons barely scratch their armor. When we do manage to damage one of their ships, it just absorbs material from nearby wreckage to repair itself. Tony Kumar, who had also joined the meeting, looked at the weapon readings. What about their coordination? If they're all connected, what happens if you disrupt their communications? Thornwall shook his head. We've tried everything. Their connection isn't based on technology we understand. It's something deeper, something biological maybe. Even when we jam their signals, they continue to work together perfectly. Jake stood and walked around the room, thinking. Everything Thornwall was telling them suggested an enemy that was essentially unbeatable. But humans had faced impossible odds before and found ways to win. Admiral, I need to see one of their ships up close. Do you have any wreckage we can examine? There's a damaged Devourer scout ship about 2 hours from here. It was crippled in our last battle, but not destroyed. We've been afraid to get too close to it. Why? Because it's still alive, Captain. Even damaged, it continues to send out signals, trying to repair itself. We're afraid that if we get too close, it might somehow infect our ships. Jake looked at his officers. This was exactly the kind of intelligence they needed, but it was also extremely dangerous. If the Devourers could somehow take control of the Valkyrie, they would have given the enemy one of Earth's most advanced warships. We'll take the risk, Jake decided. Lisa, prepare a full tactical team. Tony, I want every scanner we have focused on that wreck. Maya, monitor all frequencies for any change in Devourer activity. Thornwall looked worried. Captain, are you sure about this? We've lost ships just getting too close to their wreckage. Jake turned to face the alien admiral. Admiral, you called for Earth's warriors because you believed we could fight differently than anyone else. Well, this is how we fight. We take risks, we adapt, and we find ways to win even when winning seems impossible. As they prepared to leave the Calarian flagship, Jake couldn't help but think about what they were facing. An enemy that seemed invincible, with technology beyond anything they had encountered. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he remembered all the times in human history when people had faced impossible odds and found a way to survive. The Devourers might be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, but they had never faced humans before. And if there was one thing Jake Morrison knew about his species, it was that humans had a talent for doing the impossible when the stakes were high enough. The damaged Devourer ship hung in space like a twisted piece of nightmare. Captain Jake Morrison watched it through the viewing screen of the UE's Valkyrie as they approached slowly. The alien vessel was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull was dark, almost black, and seemed to move slightly even though the ship was clearly dead. Sensors are picking up strange readings, Captain, reported Tony Kumar from his weapons station. The hull material is unlike anything in our databases. It's organic but also metallic at the same time. Lisa Rodriguez studied her tactical displays. No life signs, but there's definitely some kind of energy source still active inside that ship. It's weak, but it's there, Jake nodded. Maya, any communications from the wreck? Very faint signals, sir. It's like the ship is trying to call for help, but it's too damaged to get a clear signal out. Admiral Thornwall's voice came through the communication system from his flagship. Captain Morrison, are you certain about this? 3 of our ships were destroyed, just getting close to Devourer wrecks. We'll be careful, Admiral, Jake replied. But we need to understand what we're fighting. Jake turned to his crew. Tony, I want you to lead the boarding party. Take 4 Marines with you. Lisa, you're in charge of the ship while I'm gone. Captain, you're not going over there, Lisa said firmly. Yes, I am. This is too important to leave to someone else. Lisa stood up from her station. Then I'm coming with you. Lisa, I need you here to command the ship if something goes wrong. With respect, sir, you need someone watching your back over there more than you need me here. Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was watching him, and he could see the concern in their faces. They all knew this was dangerous, but they also knew it was necessary. Fine, Lisa, you're with me. Tony, you have the ship. If we're not back in 2 hours, you get out of here and report to Earth Command. The shuttle ride to the Devourer ship was tense. Jake and Lisa sat with 4 Marines, all of them armed with the best weapons the Valkyrie carried. As they got closer to the alien vessel, Jake could see more details of its construction. Look at that hull, Lisa whispered. It's like it's been grown instead of built. She was right. The ship's surface had an organic quality, with smooth curves that flowed into each other. But there were also clearly mechanical parts, weapons, systems and sensor arrays that looked more traditional. Docking bay is open, reported the shuttle pilot. But I'm not sure if it's supposed to be open or if it was damaged in the battle. Take us in, Jake ordered. The shuttle landed inside the Devourer ship with a soft thud. The docking bay was dark, lit only by the shuttle's lights. As Jake and his team stepped out, their boots made strange sounds on the deck. The metal floor felt slightly soft, as if it was still alive. Air is breathable, reported Sergeant Rick Mason, the Marine team leader. But there's something else in the atmosphere. My sensors can't identify it. Jake activated his helmet's air filtration system. Everyone stays on internal air. We don't know what that unknown element might do to us. They moved deeper into the ship, following a corridor that seemed to pulse with a faint light. The walls were covered with what looked like veins, thin lines that glowed softly and seemed to carry some kind of energy through the ship. Captain, Lisa said quietly, this isn't just a ship. It's alive, Jake nodded. The further they went, the more obvious it became that the Devourer vessel was some kind of living machine. The walls breathed slowly, and occasionally they could hear sounds like a heartbeat echoing through the corridors. They reached what appeared to be the bridge. The room was circular, with control stations that seemed to grow out of the floor. At the center was a large chair that looked more like a throne, covered with the same organic material as the rest of the ship. Look at this, called Corporal Nancy White from across the room. She was standing next to what appeared to be a communication console. There are still signals coming from this thing. Jake approached the console. The display showed symbols he didn't recognize, but there were also images that made his blood run cold. The screen showed views of different star systems, with markers indicating which ones had been consumed by the Devourers. They're not just attacking random targets, Jake realized. They're following a plan. Look at this pattern. Lisa studied the display. They're moving in a spiral, consuming everything in their path and using the resources to build more ships. And according to this map, Jake said, pointing at the screen, Earth is directly in their path. Suddenly, the ship around them began to change. The walls started glowing brighter, and the heartbeat sound grew louder. The console in front of them began showing new images. Captain, we need to get out of here, Sergeant Mason said urgently. Something's happening. But Jake was transfixed by what he was seeing on the screen. The images were showing the Devourer home fleet, thousands of ships moving through space. But more importantly, they were showing the fleet's weakness. Lisa, look at this, Jake said excitedly. The ships are all connected, but the connection flows through command vessels. If you take out the command ships, the others lose coordination. Lisa grabbed his arm. Captain, the walls are moving. We really need to leave now. Jake looked around and saw that she was right. The organic walls were starting to close in, and The veins in the walls were glowing brighter. The ship was somehow trying to trap them. Everyone out now, Jake shouted. They ran through the corridors as the ship continued to change around them. The walls were definitely closing in, and the floor was becoming softer and stickier. Behind them, they could hear new sounds, like machinery starting up. The ship is trying to repair itself, Lisa panted as they ran. It's using us as raw material. They reached the docking bay just as the door began to close. Sergeant Mason and his Marines laid down covering fire at the door mechanism, not because there were enemies to fight, but because the door itself was trying to stop them. The shuttle pilot had the engines running before they were all aboard. As they lifted off, Jake looked back to see the Devourer ship changing shape, its hull flowing like liquid metal as it tried to repair the damage from the battle. Back aboard the Valkyrie, Jake called an emergency meeting with his senior staff and Admiral Thornwall. "The good news is that we learned something important," Jake began. "The Devourer ships aren't as invincible as they seem. They have command vessels that coordinate the others. If we can identify and destroy those command ships, we can disrupt their entire formation." Thornwall looked skeptical. "Captain, we've tried targeting what appeared to be command ships before. They're too well protected. That's where human tactics come in," Jake replied. "The Devourers expect you to fight them head-on, ship to ship. But humans have learned to fight differently. We use surprise, we use deception, and we use the enemy's strengths against them." Tony Kumar spoke up. "What did you have in mind, Captain?" Jake walked to the tactical display and brought up a map of the system. "The Devourers think in terms of the collective. They don't expect individual initiative. What if we could get a small team aboard one of their command ships? Not to fight them directly, but to sabotage their coordination systems from the inside." Lisa looked at the plan Jake was outlining. "Captain, that's essentially a suicide mission. Even if we could get aboard one of their ships, how would we get out?" "We might not," Jake said quietly. "But if we can disrupt their command structure, even temporarily, it might give the Calarian fleet a chance to escape." Admiral Thornwall stood up. "Captain Morrison, I cannot ask you to sacrifice your lives for my people." Jake turned to face the alien admiral. "You're not asking, Admiral. We're volunteering. This is what humans do. We fight impossible battles because someone has to." As alarms suddenly began sounding throughout the ship, Maya's voice came over the communication system. "Captain, we've got multiple contacts approaching. The Devourer fleet has found us." Jake looked at his crew and saw determination in their faces. They all knew what they were facing, and they all knew the odds were against them. But they also knew that sometimes the impossible was the only option left. "All hands to battle stations," Jake commanded. "It's time to show the galaxy how Earth's warriors fight." The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a dark storm cloud. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the UES Valkyrie as hundreds of enemy ships appeared on his tactical display. Each ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of his own vessel, and they moved with perfect coordination. "My God," whispered Lisa Rodriguez. "There are so many of them." Admiral Thornwall's voice came through the communication system from his flagship. "Captain Morrison, we count over 400 enemy vessels. My remaining ships are ready to fight, but we cannot win this battle." Jake studied the enemy formation on his main screen. The Devourer ships were arranged in a perfect pattern, with the largest vessels at the center and smaller ships forming protective rings around them. It was exactly what he had hoped to see. "Admiral, I can see at least 6 command ships in there." "Formation," Jake replied. "The big ones in the center. If we can take out even 2 of them, their coordination will break down." "Captain, how do you propose we get close enough? Their weapons will destroy us long before we reach the command ships." Jake turned to his crew. "Tony, what's our status on those kinetic missiles we modified?" Tony Kumar checked his weapons display. We have 12 armor-piercing missiles loaded with conventional explosives. Not very powerful compared to their energy weapons, but they should be able to punch through ship hulls. Perfect. Maya, open a channel to all Calarian ships. When Maya nodded that the channel was open, Jake began speaking. All Calarian vessels, this is Captain Morrison. I need you to listen carefully, because we only get one chance at this. He brought up a tactical display that all the ships could see. The Devourer's ships are going to attack us in their standard formation. They'll expect us to group together and fight defensively. Instead, we're going to split into 3 groups and attack from different directions. Admiral Thornwall's voice showed confusion. Captain, that will divide our strength. We'll be even more outnumbered. That's exactly what they'll think, Jake replied. But while 2 groups are attacking from the sides, the 3rd group is going to do something they won't expect. We're going to ram one of their command ships. The silence that followed was broken by Lisa. Captain, are you talking about a suicide attack? Not suicide, Lieutenant. Sacrifice, there's a difference. Jake pointed to the tactical display. The Valkyrie will lead the ramming attack against the central command ship. When we hit them, our modified missiles will detonate inside their hull. The explosion should be enough to destroy their command systems. Tony looked up from his console. Sir, even if that works, we won't survive the impact. Jake nodded. I know. But if we can take out their command ship, the rest of their fleet will lose coordination. The Calarian ships will have a chance to escape and warn other systems about the Devourer threat. Admiral Thornwall's voice was quiet when he spoke. Captain Morrison, I cannot ask you to sacrifice your lives for my people. You're not asking, Admiral. This is our choice. This is what humans do when innocent people need help. The Devourer fleet began moving toward them, their dark ships cutting through space like knives. Jake could see their weapons charging, preparing. For the battle, all ships, begin the attack, Jake commanded. Groups 1 and 2, hit them from the sides. Draw their attention away from us. The Calarian ships split into 2 formations and began their attacks. Their energy weapons lit up space as they engaged the outer rings of Devourer vessels. The enemy ships responded exactly as Jake had hoped, turning to face the attacking forces and leaving their center less protected. Full speed ahead, Jake ordered. Take us straight at that command ship. The Valkyrie accelerated toward the center of the enemy formation. Around them, the battle raged as Calarian ships fought desperately against the overwhelming Devourer force. Several alien ships were already destroyed, their hulls torn apart by the enemy's terrible weapons. They're targeting us, Lisa reported. Multiple enemy ships are turning toward us. Jake could see the Devourer vessels beginning to realize what he was planning. Several of the smaller ships broke formation to intercept the Valkyrie, but they were too late. The human ship was already past their defensive line. Incoming fire, Tony announced. The ship shook as Devourer weapons struck their shields. The lights flickered, and Jake could hear the strain in the engine systems as they pushed toward their target. Shields down to 40%, reported Lieutenant Sam Davis from the engineering station. Keep us on course, Jake ordered. We only need to get close enough. The command ship grew larger on their viewing screen. It was truly massive, easily 10 times the size of the Valkyrie. Its hull was covered with the same organic-looking material Jake had seen on the damaged scout ship, and it pulsed with energy as it coordinated the entire Devourer fleet. Captain, Maya called out, I'm detecting some kind of signal from the command ship. It's trying to communicate with us. Put it through, Jake said. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English. It was cold, emotionless, like a machine trying to sound human. Human vessel, you will stop your attack. Your sacrifice is meaningless. We will consume your world as we have consumed all others. Jake smiled grimly. You're wrong about that. Humans don't give up just because the odds are bad. Your species is small and weak. You cannot stop us. Maybe not, Jake replied. But we can slow you down, and sometimes that's enough. The Valkyrie was now less than 1,000 meters from the command ship. Jake could see the details of its hull, the weapon systems that could have destroyed his ship a dozen times over. But the Devourers seemed confused by his tactics, unsure how to respond to a direct ramming attack. All hands, brace for impact, Jake announced over the ship's communication system. In the final moments before collision, Jake thought about Earth, about the billions of people who would never know that a single ship had bought them time to prepare for what was coming. He thought about his crew, brave men and women who had followed him into this desperate battle without question. The Valkyrie struck the command ship's hull with tremendous force. The impact drove the human vessel deep into the alien ship's organic structure. As the hulls merged, Tony triggered the detonation of all 12 modified missiles. The explosion that followed lit up the entire battlefield. The command ship's hull rippled and convulsed as the blast tore through its internal systems. The pulsing lights that had coordinated the Devourer fleet flickered and went dark. Across the battlefield, the effect was immediate. The Devourer ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly began drifting apart. Their weapons fire became random and uncoordinated. Several ships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Admiral Thornwall's voice echoed across the communication channels. All Calarian ships, the enemy coordination is broken. Attack now while they're confused. The remaining Calarian vessels pressed their attack against the disorganized Devourer fleet. Without their command systems, the enemy ships fought as individuals, instead of as a unified force. For the first time in the battle, the defenders had an advantage. Within an hour, the Devourer fleet was in full retreat. Nearly half their ships had been destroyed or disabled, and the rest fled back into hyperspace. The Calarian system was saved. Days later, rescue teams found survivors in the wreckage of the Valkyrie. Captain Jake Morrison and most of his crew had survived the impact, protected by emergency bulkheads and the fact that the command ship's organic hull had absorbed much of the collision's force. As Jake recovered in the medical bay of a Calarian hospital ship, Admiral Thornwall visited him with news from across the galaxy. Captain, word of your victory has spread to every civilized system. For the first time since the Devourers appeared, people have hope. Dozens of species are sending fleets to join the fight. Jake smiled weakly. Good, we'll need all the help we can get. This was just one fleet. There will be others. Yes, but now we know they can be beaten. And more importantly, we know that humans will fight for others, even when they have nothing to gain. Through the window of the medical bay, Jake could see Earth ships arriving in the system. The UEZ Liberty led a fleet of 20 vessels, humanity's response to the call for help. Admiral Rebecca Stone had come with reinforcements and supplies. As Jake watched more ships arrive, he realized that something fundamental had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. They had allies now, species that had seen what humans would do for strangers in need. The war against the Devourers was far from over, but for the first time, the galaxy had hope. And it was hope that had been bought with the courage of a single ship and crew who answered a desperate call for help. The message that had started it all proved to be true. Sometimes the deadliest warriors were not those who fought for conquest, but those who fought to save others. And across the galaxy, that message was being heard by every species that valued freedom over survival.